Alrighty, welcome back to the Out of the Woods podcast. I've been looking forward to this one ever since you scheduled it a few weeks back. We got Kimia Hamidi. I think I said it right. Just asked him before we got on, but I think it was right. From one of my favorite companies, Ramp. We've been an early customer for a long time. Ramp's been a customer of SwagUp for a long time. So it's only fitting to have this conversation. You guys have also had Artem, our CFO, on your podcast. And I think you're now hosting or co-hosting the Ramp podcast. So I'm excited for that to start launching and listening to some of them. But thanks for coming on.
Of course, I'm happy to be here. We love you as a customer, and you guys have been a long time supporter of Ramp. So this feels overdue. I'm excited to dive in.
Yeah, I remember the original Ramp credit card. It was a plastic piece of shit, and it had like a green and black logo. And it felt like one of those gift cards that people send you in the mail that aren't real gift cards. Like you have to call them to book an appointment to then get the real gift card, or like the fake credit card that they send. And now you have like these super fancy white credit cards. It's like you and Apple, the only ones with white cards.
Yeah, the new ones are really nice. You should frame the old ones. It's going to be like a piece of memorabilia when we're IPO and $100 billion company.
Yep. No, 100%. And like a lot of the guests that have been on here, another Miami native or transplant from, were you living in Canada before you got here? Or were you also in the States first?
No, I grew up in California, so U.S. citizenship. So the transition over was super easy. But no, I moved a little bit before Ramp acquired my company. So Kareem convinced me to be here. So here I am.
It doesn't take much to convince. I think there's a lot of pros to come here, especially from Canada. Were you in Canada during like the peak of the pandemic?
I was, yeah. So I actually a little on the history of Buyer. So I built Buyer through the pandemic. Part of the pandemic was actually a catalyst.
Always great businesses that start in like shitstorms,
Totally, yeah. Well, I mean the insight to Buyer, there's a few, but I'll give a TLDR on what Buyer is, and then I can sort of talk about it. But basically, what Buyer is an on-demand procurement service or negotiation as a service for tech-focused companies. And there's a few things. If people who have bought enterprise software will instantly understand why that's valuable. But to people who haven't bought enterprise software, there's a few problems when buying. One is the back and forth between vendors takes an enormous amount of time. And just going back and forth, going over the proposals, just trying to get down to an MSA, it takes a while. The other big one is there's a lack of transparency in costs in enterprise software. And so the big one there, and I'm sure you've seen this,
you always feel like you're getting screwed.
That's exactly right. And so the big thing is, you'll go in to get a quote and they'll say, well, what's your budget? You say $100,000. And they say, well, you're in luck. We like you. So it's $90,000. We'll give you a 10% discount. Yeah. And what you don't realize is for the exact same services you're paying or someone else is paying, $50,000, $70,000.
Nothing worries me more than seeing contact us.
Yes, exactly. And this behavior is happening in Slack rooms, right? Like CFOs are back channeling, hey, is this a good price for Salesforce? Like, what are you paying on this? Like, does this make sense on SendGrid? And so I took the thesis of Rich Barton, who founded Expedia, Glassdoor, and Zillow, on the concept of data wants to be free. This data is on the internet somewhere. It is super valuable. It's all hidden. And so I'm going to build a company. The base layer is all the data on what things cost, and then the negotiation as a service on top of it. That was scaled up. And the big catalyst, and I'll tie it back to the pandemic, the big catalyst on this was, if you think about your capital expenditure as a business, number one is your human capital, right? How much your salaries, how much it costs to run your. Number two was infrastructure, your building, your rent, your laptops, your CapEx. And then number three was your tooling. The insight that I had was 2 and 3 were going to switch. And they're going to switch in a big way because everyone is forced to go remote. Everyone has to buy all these tools. No one understands what anything costs. And so they can't avoid it. But if they can go in armed with the knowledge on what things cost and what they should actually be aware of, it's incredibly powerful. And that's persisted, right? I mean, you've seen the explosion of software spend. And
you're also seeing software that could potentially take the roles of people. Like where in the past you might hire 10 people, maybe you'll hire 5, but you'll bring on 2 tools to just get your team kind of superpowers that enable them to do more than they could before as well.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I mean, there's all the basic stuff, right? Where there's a lot of these contracts, they have auto renews baked in. You don't have a solid vendor management system. You don't reach out to your vendor 60 days in advance. Your $70,000 contract renews. You're on the hook for this. That's one full headcount, right? And that's just a basic error of omission.
I hate auto renews.
It's amateur hour. Like you can't, that shouldn't be a thing, right? But it is, and it happens all the time. And so fast forward a little bit. Ramp and Buyer started as a partnership. And then Eric, Kareem, and Colin and I really realized that we had the same mission, and we were aligned in the same goal of helping our customers save time and money. And so it only made sense. They acquired Buyer. I moved to Miami, and now we're building the Buyer functionality within Ramp and offering it to customers as part of this.
It seems Ramp is very kind of partner oriented. You guys are constantly launching different partnerships and exploring different avenues to kind of, I guess it's a means of testing different, avenues and waters and see what resonates with the customer and then figure out what you want to build natively into the platform potentially over time, versus whether that's an acquisition like what they did with you all, and then now you're really productizing it and scaling it, and then also things that maybe you'll just build yourself based on the success of partnerships. So the way to think about it?
I think that's part of it. I think the other part of it is just lean into your strengths, right? Like, we have probably arguably one of the best engineering teams in the world. And there are things that partnerships can do to accelerate that. And so what we can do on the background is we can build a fantastic product with a partnership hook, right? That aligns our customers, and we can go from there, right? I mean, we have a great partnership with OnePass, and we've embedded cards into OnePass. That's a natural thing where there's instant distribution for us in the storing of cards in your password manager, as well as a very slick integration on the product. And so I think it's a complement of how do we mutually benefit each other, and how do we move incredibly fast so that it's not a zero-sum game.
Yeah. Well, as an entrepreneur, it looks like you've sold a few different companies, and you've built different companies. Like, what was it about Ramp that was interesting enough for you to be willing to join for the greater good of a bigger organization versus keep running the playbook that you're running, going after a big market that seems to be getting bigger? Like, why'd you decide to partner up?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's a few obvious reasons. One is just like, I loved the team. The team felt like an extension of my team, and I mean, you see this in acquisitions a lot, where there's a culture clash, and our missions were so aligned from the start. It's funny because Emily, the head of partnerships at Ramp, first reached out to me. It's their slogan was time is money, save both. And Buyer is, we're here to save you time and money without being jerks. And it's just like, from the outset, we were so aligned. And so I think that really helped a lot of it. I think there was a lot of stuff too that I really, I mean, selfishly, right? This goes both ways, but selfishly, there were a lot of things that I wanted to do in a shorter time frame. And partnering with Ramp and ultimately an acquisition really allowed me to move faster to do this. And I mean, it's no secret that Ramp is growing. It's a rocket ship of a company. It's one of the, arguably one of the best companies out there right now. I'm biased because, they bought my company, and I'm there, and I'm a proud proponent. But there's just so much more that we could do together, and we could build a bigger impact for our customers. We can help our customers save more money than I could by myself, quite frankly. And the way I viewed it is, yes, I've built and sold a few companies, and I've learned a lot. But do I believe that this can be a 10x learning opportunity for me, and I can get exposure to a lot of really interesting, unique people and things that are going on? And ultimately, the answer is yes. It's been just over a year, and it's been a wild one.
What do you think are some of the possibilities of, with the engineering team that you guys have, the world-class engineering team you have, going after this problem that maybe you wouldn't have been able to tackle in the past with the team you had before, or the resources you had before? Like, what can you do to really productize and scale the mission that you originally had that maybe you couldn't have done if you just kept going on your own?
Yeah, I mean, the very obvious one is price intelligence, right? Like, I think it is one thing to show a customer someone else is paying $20,000 less than you versus going and getting them $20,000 in savings, right? Because you can tell the narrative. You can go into your vendor A and you can say, hey, I know someone else is paying less than me. And they're going to say, I don't care. It doesn't matter. Like, you are a totally different company. It's a different time in the market. Excuse, right? And so a very clear example is, one of the things that we're building at Ramp is we're building out the ability to layer on price intelligence onto your. And so what that means is, if you're about to purchase something, I mean, picture Google Flights as a perfect analogy. If you're about to buy something, it's like, this is a high price. Watch out for these, here are these auto renews. And there's just all these things that teams try and move quickly on in your organization. I mean, we've saved SwagUp a bunch of money, right? Where it's, you can hand off.
We like saving money.
We love saving you money. You can hand off a full purchase cycle, which is 30 back and forth emails with a vendor, $20,000 in savings in the drag of a click and a few emails, or a few back and forth message platform. It's just faster and better. And the idea, one of the things that we heard from our customers a lot was we like an integrated system where we don't have to leave our platform. And for buyer, due to a lack of resources, we had them leave the platform, right? We were scrappy, we were making it happen. And the idea that you have an on-demand procurement team baked into your card, you have price intelligence, you have bill pay, you have reimbursements, you have expense management, you have everything right there. The fact that we can supercharge a finance team, and to your point where, you'd hire someone that, you need a team of 10 to accomplish what you can do with a team of 2 now. It's just operational efficiency. And we're helping companies avoid the death by 1,000 cuts of, money is just bleeding out of the company, and we keep it contained in the ecosystem.
Yep. And we'll go into more detail on how that's, in my opinion, highly relevant given the kind of economic environment that we're in. But just a few more questions from a backstory standpoint. What's your take on SaaS companies and their ethics and morals and pricing strategies and sales strategies in general? There was a thread yesterday about Figma and the whole thing about how Figma, basically anytime you invite somebody onto a page to review it, they automatically add you as a full editorial user at full rate, so it's like $15 a month per user. It's very kind of black hat type, you just automatically get enrolled, and you have to go into the user management, turn them down to just a viewing member. And that's, people have $10,000, $20,000 bills with Figma and they don't even realize it. And maybe they're even stuck on annual plans because they signed up for annual pricing the first time. What do you think, SaaS companies are generally good actors, bad actors? What have you seen dealing with them over the last, few years?
Yeah, largely almost all are good actors. I would say by and large, because the way that I think about this too is the amount of empowerment that a tool gives on behalf, Figma is a phenomenal company, a phenomenal tool. What they're doing on pricing, is that suspicious? Yeah, kinda. It's not great. But there are ways to mitigate it, right? And you need to be aware. I think one of the things that is a very common misconception just in pricing negotiation as a whole is, it's not used car salesmen go in, beat the vendor up and be like, fuck you, whatever. It's never like that. It's always, look, you are a partner that we rely, you power the backbone of our email. We cannot exist without you. We also understand that you have margins to make and we respect you as a business, but we are also a business. We cannot afford this cost. It is too high. We understand that there are other better costs to be had. We understand that it's end of quarter. We know that there's other discounts that you're giving people. It is unfair for you to quote us high just because. And there are other companies who will just push a little bit harder and say they're willing to go to another competitor because there are other options out there, right? And I think having an honest conversation as a finance leader, as an operational org, it really matters, right? And these companies don't, because they see it all the time, and you get it, right? These companies have margins to defend. There's a reason why they can employ hundreds and provide amazing lives down the business. It's a spectrum. It's always a spectrum. If you've ever tried to cancel a Wall Street Journal subscription, oh my God, what a nightmare, right? Amazing service, unbelievable nightmare. There's other companies like HubSpot who are incredibly
gyms.
Try
gyms.
Gyms
Never. Are the worst.
Never, exactly. Yeah, spin up a virtual card.
I was gonna say use a fake a fake card. I did that once. That was the first digital transaction I did with my Ramp card. Was I got Disney Plus because I wanted to see one of the new Pixar movies or something, but I didn't want to watch Disney Plus anymore, and I didn't want to get charged every single month. So we're
not condoning this behavior. That's purely a user action. But I think it's a spectrum, right? There's companies, that treat their users incredibly friendly and they're very generous, right? And there's other companies that are egregious. What really matters here is knowing the bounds and knowing the structure and knowing the price and knowing what to expect from each vendor. And that changes over time, right? That's really hard. That changes for a variety of reasons, right? You could one of your top vendors could get a new CMO and they're like, well, we think we're a premium product now, so we're going to triple the price. Same product, no changes, no value increase. And it's that's probably a strong negotiating argument as a finance leader to go in and be like, look, we've been a customer for 5 years. We're not paying 3x the price. This is not going to happen. And you will probably maintain your price. Whereas a company who is not willing to negotiate or work with a partner to negotiate on their behalf, we'll just pay 3x for no reason.
Also kind of nice to have a third party negotiating, because it's kind of like the good cop, bad cop. Like you don't want to piss off the relationship. Like you like them. Like one of the things with us too is a lot of our vendors are also customers of ours.
Yes.
And we don't really want to like be the hard ass on them about the pricing, because we want to continue that relationship. So it is nice to have that third party intermediary. Hey, we work with Ramp, savings and buying, like they've got this covered. Like, would love to see what kind of the end result of this is. And we maintain that good relationship.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think to that point as well, the key line from Buyer that we've really carried over to Ramp is we negotiate without being jerks. We respect the fact that these are your partners and your customers and you have a built-in relationship, and we are not there to do any damage. And we will prioritize the relationship over the saving. Is 5% on 25, say you're going to get 25% instead of 20%. Is that 5% worth a damaged relationship? Almost never, unless you're willing to switch, right? And that's something that we really take into account, because like you said, these are your customers, these are your vendors. They're helping you build your business.
Yep, 100%. In the beginning, I mean, I imagine you didn't really have much data from external sources. There wasn't really like a public data set to find out, what people were paying for these things or what they should be paying. So I imagine you're just kind of old-fashioned negotiations, and then over time you're starting to build benchmarks. And obviously now with the access to all the spend data through Ramp, you could probably build some pretty complex, data sets. But in the beginning, was it very kind of just anecdotal and manual?
The beauty of this is no one has the data. So one data point is infinitely more than your customer has, and it can provide you a benchmark. So yeah, it was very scrappy to start, and we built this data set very quickly over time. I mean, the pricing models all fall into a relatively similar structure, right? There's usage-based pricing, there's seat-based pricing, there's a hybrid model, and there's platform fees and service fees and all that stuff, right? And you can build inferences pretty quickly. And so it's not hard to build a very valuable model on top of this for negotiation.
Gotcha. One of the things I was going to say is, like, if you take this out a few more, thought processes or years, the end state is more and more transparency, I suppose. Like, what do you see 3 to 5 years from now? Does everybody go to very transparent, upfront, standardized pricing because you're kind of building that transparency behind the scenes and it's just an inevitability of it? Or does it continue to stay very tailored and bespoke and behind the veil? Like, what's the end state for SaaS pricing?
Yeah, I think the answer is it depends, right? And it depends on the complexity of the product. There are some things that require custom development, and therefore, take NetSuite, for example, right? If you take NetSuite,
nobody likes NetSuite, but somehow they're a huge company.
Nobody Oracle is evil corp. Although I'm a big fan of Larry Ellison. There's a lot of great books on him. But no, I mean, NetSuite is integral to finance, right? If you are a big company and you need an ERP, you're likely the setup of NetSuite depends on the complexity of your organization, and that by definition has to be a custom. It is tailored to you. The platform fee, however, is probably pretty standard, and it is standard. I know this, and it depends on a variety of things, right? Like, they'll give aggressive discounts at end of quarter, and they'll do all these things. And this pricing exists. Like, if you look at a company like a big vendor management platform like G2 Track, right? They are a Yelp for business directory listings. They also have G2 Track, which has all the pricing. They know what everything costs. And so it's not just that credit card companies understand this and we have this data set and buyer and vendor G2. The world of fully transparent pricing is likely going to be over. And there's going to be complexities, right? And there's probably going to reach an equilibrium point where it just meets in the middle, and you say 20% premium or a 20% discount, and this is the band that we play in, and this is what our price is.
Yep. Last question related to this topic is, in general, what's your thought on just SaaS? Like, is there too much SaaS in the world? Is SaaS ballooned? Is the trend of having, I think at one point SwagUp had maybe over 100 different platforms that we were using. Is that the norm going forward? Is it here to stay?
I think it's, if anything, here to stay. It's going to increase. And the reason why I think so two things. One, I'll break the question into should there exist more SaaS, and what's the trend? What's going to happen? I think it will increase. And I think it's the barriers to entry are getting lower and lower, and the ability to spin up a company is getting easier and easier. And if you look at like vertical SaaS and just specific solutions, there is just a proliferation, and then there's a competitive explosion around that proliferation. Take partnerships, right? Partnerships traditionally had a lack of software in general. There just wasn't any solution. And then Crossbeam came along. And then Crossbeam is basically a shared data center and a CRM for your partnerships. Yep. 9 competitors spin up around Crossbeam, right? All SaaS partnership vertical integrated CRMs. And so that explosion happens. And what happens on the enterprise side is there's some partnership manager somewhere where it's like, God, these spreadsheets are killing me. I wish there was a better solution. I'm going to try one of these. One seat, the hooks are in, you get integrated. You hire 3 more partnership people. Someone's like, well, at my last company, we use Crossbeam. We're not using this weird one that you've signed up for. I'm going to bring over Crossbeam. You're now paying for 2. Expand that to everyone in the organization. Do I think it should continue? Maybe. I think competition is largely good. I am a big fan of competition, and I'm a big fan of capitalism. I think it's one of the best systems that we. That is a very unnuanced take, and I will.
Don't tell them in Canada. They'll never let you back.
Hey, that's why I left. But I think competition is generally good. I think the ability to create a company is fantastic. Obviously, saying that as someone who started, I think I've started 4 companies at this point. Too many. And I just think that you can't kill opportunity, and the market will win. The market will win, and it'll point to a clear leader, and there will be a long tail of products. What I think is going to become the bigger trend is managing. I think there is just a lot. I mean, we've seen this internally, right? Like if you look at internal procurement at Ramp, there's someone wants to buy something that's $1 million contract, and they want it for one feature that costs $50,000, and it's like, come on, and we don't let that happen, right? Like the system and the product is built in place where we have this discipline and we have this rigor where that's not going to happen. And I think it's largely just you're trying to move fast. But I think this is going to be very prevalent at a lot of companies where they're really going to care about operational efficiency. And does this dollar translate into $1.10? Or, we're not going to spend it, right? Where's the real ROI of where we're putting our efforts? And that could be tooling, like operational leverage.
Yep. I just had Harry from Abstract Ops on here, and there's kind of this push towards these abstraction layers where, it's almost like an aggregation of all your tools into one place as this centralized operating system that connects all these data sources. And it almost becomes where these other SaaS tools aren't really interfaces anymore. They're really like databases, and they're all talking to each other through this abstraction layer on top. I think Rippling's in a similar camp. And then also maybe even Retool is in a similar camp where you're just pulling in all these different, data sources and SaaS tools to then build like this, layer where you manage it. Do you think we'll see more of those types of platforms?
Yeah, I think that's actually a key insight. If you think back to, 5 years ago, there's all these vertical solutions, right? And now that the base layer is largely built out, and there's still pockets of opportunity, but I think largely it's baked out. What matters now is intelligence and insight. And the way you do that is combining multiple ideas or multiple data streams into one, right? How is our customer acquisition costs interfacing with our net retention? What does this mean, right? And you've traditionally had 2 separate platforms that
you want to tell the story.
That's exactly right. You want to tell the story. How is your customer converting through your funnel? What does that story look like? And 5 different tools are telling that story, and none of them are talking to you. You need that layer on top to provide powerful.
What do you think about things like Retool? And I think another one's like QuickBase, where, because a lot of SaaS tools are very simple solutions at the end of the day. They're like, an Excel spreadsheet with a few different functionalities on top of it or something. And a lot of that could potentially be built better to suit your needs by building your own, dashboards in Retool or something that are kind of low code ways for people to build exactly what they want. Do you think that things like that are gonna, take away some of the need for some of these niche vertical solutions?
I think it depends. I mean, one of the other ones that I've seen is Frontly, which just quickly turns any sheet into an app. The key
Bubble
here,
too does some of this.
Bubble does the same. Yeah. The key with all of these is really your speed versus if you want to go fast versus do you want to invest the risk, right? And a lot of these tools allow you to move fast, right? And there is a time where you may need to pivot from Retool and build your own system and whatever it is. But I think what Retool has been able to do is give this and Bubble and these other things is just allow teams to move incredibly quickly so that they can stand things up, they can build those insights, right? I mean, it's if you can see 3 data streams into one and make intelligent decisions versus building your own, you're 6 months ahead. And in startup land, that's everything, right? In business, that's actually quite good.
Yep. Yeah, and potentially they're like sandbox environments to know if the solution that you might be looking for is actually going to solve your problem. Because I think, to your point, a lot of times you have people, they come into a company and they say, hey, I need this tool. Like, this is just the tool I use. And then it doesn't really get leveraged, fully when it's in there. And then people just kind of churn. So anyway,
the lack of utilization kills me. Like,
oh,
just
yeah.
have a strong business case, have discipline, treat this money like it's your own money. And that was a big culture shock for me, is going from, running my own company, every dollar was my dollar, into a much bigger organization. And, for context, Ramp bought my company at 80 headcount, and now we're mid 400s, I think. And so that growth in that amount of time, you just see a lot, the exposure, the learnings, you just see a ton. And I mean, it's hard to treat every dollar as your own dollar, but every company has to, through every level. It's super important.
Cool. Well, we got about 10, 15 minutes. I want to, transition a little bit to just, the economic environment today. So, obviously if you're on Twitter a lot, or you watch the news, or you read the Wall Street Journal, there's so many different factors at play right now. We had this very frothy, bubbly environment for 10, 12 years. And we were always kind of, on the edge, wondering like, what's the thing that's going to turn, finally bring the economy down? What's going to be, the catalyst that creates some sort of recessionary environment or correction or something? And obviously we have, crazy inflation, supply chain constraints. We have the war in Ukraine, and, there's just so many things. Now there's energy and food instability. For those not really paying attention, like, what's your take on what's going on right now, and how much should startup founders and teams be paying attention to this versus just keeping their heads down and working on their business?
So it's interesting, right? I'm of an age where everything has largely been up and to the right, and we haven't seen inflation. I think you and I are actually very, very similar. We haven't seen inflation. We haven't seen a massive drop. I mean, 2008, it's like you're not really investing. And now it's just a lot of these problems become very real. I would say for startup founders particularly is just focus. Keep your head down, focus. Unless there are real implications. Well, two things actually. Let me back up. There's two things. One is, unless interest rates truly affect your startup and inflation truly affects your startup, pay attention. If not, provide value to your customers, focus on the outcome, and really, really drill into the value that you're providing. I think the other side of that too is we have been in this place where liquidity has been basically, right, capital has been free. Companies that could be funded on just the worst ideas are being funded. And I think there's going to be a real reckoning. And so if you can get ahead of that, you really should. And you should think about operational discipline, and you should think about the fundamentals. I think you actually sent me a question earlier where it's like, how far do you skew on growth versus fundamentals? I skew much farther to fundamentals. And there is a time and a place for growth. And I think it's really important when you have that fire burning, jet fuel on the fire, right? But until that, and especially for a lot of startups don't have that jet fuel. Having that intellectual honesty to say, we're not just going to throw jet fuel on our fire. We're actually going to build the base. We're going to add more logs, and we're going to make sure that this is actually a blaze versus an ember. Then we add the capital. I think that's how startup founders should really. I mean, yeah. Viva Systems. I like talk about my dream example. One round, $7 million raised. They are now a $2 billion company built on top of Salesforce as a vertical CRM for life sciences. Unbelievable. Zoom, incredible capital efficiency. I love story.
We built SwagUp on top of Salesforce. Like
insane.
So much of our back end ERP warehouse management is all custom Salesforce instances.
I love that.
Yeah.
You can be scrappy. You can build an incredible business with not a lot.
Nope. My buddy who I just had on the podcast, Greg Gallant, he's in Miami now. They just raised their first round after 13 years from Susquehanna, 180 million Series A.
Congrats to them. Huge. What discipline operating in the background. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I love it. You never heard of the company. You never heard of the guy. He's just quietly executing, the most humble dude. And he told me, we were on a call last week, and he's like, yeah, we finally took some money off the table, brought in some capital. I was like, oh, maybe brought in like 30 million or 40 million. And then I see the article this morning, 180 million. I'm like, Series A. I'm like, holy shit.
That is awesome. Like, and by the way, the note on that too is strong companies can still raise. There is a ton of dry powder out there. And if you have a great company, VCs, by obligation to their LPs, need to find great investments. So if you have a great company that you're building, it is not a bad time to raise. It's hard for sure, but if you believe in what you're building and you think you can do it, the world is your oyster. You still absolutely can execute.
Yep. I think one of the interesting things about all of this is that, the world kind of shifted very quickly. March, April, May, whenever the specific moment in time was, it went from like all things up and to the right to all things down and, to the right, very,
Totally.
in a matter of days or weeks. And, the incentive over the last few, several years has just been, money's cheap. It's a land grab for market share, just grow as fast as you can. And now, companies have to totally kind of shift a little bit and shift their mentality. And it's kind of weird because you have investors that were pushing this narrative of like growth, growth, growth. And then all of a sudden they're on their like, soapbox saying, oh no, you got to be like fundamentals. You got to look at your burn rate. You got to look at gross margin. And, do you blame the teams that were so highly incentivized by growth and are finding it a little bit hard to shift? Like, who is anybody at fault? Like, what do you think was the right mentality going into this last few years?
I think it's really hard to say. I think it's very contextual. If you look at a company like Ramp, right, we clearly have something special. Capital allows us to scale. Debt facilities allow our margin to expand. It is necessary to raise capital to grow. And to Eric and Green's credit, they were very intelligent. I think there are a lot of companies. There's companies. I'll just make something up, right? Like your Slack plugin for perks and rewards is not going to be $1 billion outcome. And the fact that you raised as such is, I don't want to say negligent, but I can't think of a better word. And there's like, I
think the proliferation of secondary is really, kind of muddied the waters because it's like, okay, yes, I'm going to cash out 10 mil, 15 million for like 2 years of work. I'm fully set. If this gets killed, I don't really care. Yeah. And by the way, I get all this credibility that I'm a unicorn company. I'm this founder that built something that's worthwhile. I get invited to the parties. And maybe it'll be worth something one day, but it doesn't really matter. I think that really changed.
That is egregious.
Things.
Yes, I think that's a great call out. I think like that type of behavior, raise with very little to show for it and take a lot off the table, is egregious. You should be raising in service of whatever you're building for your customers. And I think there's, you should have a strong obligation to return, to provide a strong return for your investors. And if you don't go into investing or raising thinking like that, that's a huge red flag in my mind. I mean, even me, I'm writing small checks into my angel companies and I'm like, hey, where's my update? Like, what's going on? Like, I want to know, like, these are my hard earned dollars. And the fact that I haven't seen an update in 2 months, there are people who have written much bigger checks than me that haven't checked in. And I'm like, that's insane. Like, no, that's not okay. Like those are hard earned dollars regardless or not. And so I think like, is there anyone to blame? No. Is there a lack of discipline? Absolutely. And I think it's gonna be interesting to see what happens. I mean, companies like you, right? Like I love the discipline and rigor that you've brought to building your business, and it's been super fun to watch. And there are other companies that will be forced into this situation.
Yeah, I think a lot of companies are, the ones that are good, that are led by good people, are going to get stronger and stronger through this because it's just going to force that focus and tighten the aperture. But it's also going to crush a ton of other companies at the same time, which might be good for the ecosystem as a whole to learn some lessons like that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see for sure, but I think largely, yeah, you're right.
Where do you think Ramp kind of fits into all of this? Obviously, the whole ethos has always been since the start, even in a frothy environment, it's like, let's save teams money. Obviously, that seems more timely than ever. It seems like, from what I've seen from the outside, growth rates continue to remain incredibly high. You're acquiring a ton of new customers. Is Ramp a very compelling offering right now in this market?
Unequivocally, yes. I mean, without a doubt, right? The greatest analogy I can provide is if you think about spend across your organization as death by 1,000 cuts, the only way to prevent that is visibility. And one of the things that I think is just so important across the board is providing visibility into where your spend is going, providing tight financial controls with a company and a partner that is aligned to back you up. They are in your corner. We've never taken the stance of, we think you want 50 million air miles. I can't hire engineers. Like I
thought that was a great deal when I was like just starting the company.
Totally.
We had like over 1 million points like 2 years in, and then Artem comes in as like the first financial hire in the company. He's like, we're getting off these fucking points like right away. We're going to cash back like right away.
Totally, and it's just these basic things that ultimately what you really care about is alignment and long-term success. Because if you're printing cash, you can fly your team around. You don't need these points. And if you are aligned with a partner that reinforces this discipline and ensures that you are moving in the right direction, ensures that your spend is under control, making sure that your bills are being paid on time, none of these contracts are having any gotchas, you have an on-demand procurement team in your corner. I mean, quite frankly, like even, I'm biased, obviously, but like what Ramp provides is phenomenal across the board for companies. Like if you look at it objectively, it is incredible, the value that Ramp provides. The fact that on average, we can save companies, if you're activated across all savings products, around 4%, it's just over 4%. That's enormous across your spend. Like you can't get that anywhere else. And so I think in a time like now, when discipline matters more than ever and executional or operational excellence matters more than ever, Ramp is the only part.
And you're starting to introduce ways to lengthen cash conversion cycles as well. It's not just the saving side. Now it's also like, how can we make your dollars last longer, especially when cash flow is so important right now?
That's exactly right. Yeah. And not to continue to plug Ramp on your podcast, but it's very timely. I mean, we just launched Flex as well. And having this integrated solution where if you don't have the cash flow to run a 30-day balance, you can run a 90-day balance. I mean, for logistics companies, this is incredibly relevant, right?
Yep.
And so we're always looking for what is the long-term value that we can provide our customers? Where are their core pain points and where can we provide the most value in the most efficient way possible, ultimately with the idea of saving them time and money. And that's how we build everything.
Yep. Well, I have two last questions. And one of them is a kind of an extension of the Flex conversation. You talk about rising interest rates. To me, my first thoughts go like, that breaks a lot of business models. There's a lot of businesses out there that have been predicated on, lending cheap money, or, cheap money has like made them successful, or even something like Flex. Interest rates dictate what you can offer to the end customer in terms of cost of capital. What are some things that you think of right away in terms of things that have done really well over the last 2, 3, 4 years because of cheap money that are going to have to really shift because of the new cost of capital?
Yeah, I mean the very obvious one is these like consumer buy now pay later companies, right? That's just my obvious answer. I think on the business side, it's much more secure. There is a solid stream of cash flows. There are educated financial leaders on the background where they can make a calculated decision. And I think one of the things, in building Flex is we really wanted to make sure that nothing is transparent. You understand exactly what the cost is. You understand how much runway this gets you. It is a aligned solution, right? That's what I would say. I think those are probably the big ones. Those are probably the big ones.
Yeah, BNPL was the one I was thinking of right away as well. Last
exactly.
question, the one I like to end all the episodes on. If you're for the founders and teams listening right now, maybe they're in a precarious spot because they maybe made a few bad decisions, or they thought the world would look like X and it looks like Y, and now their backs are against the wall and they have to make some tough decisions, or they're facing existential threat. What would be your advice to them? I know you hit on it a little bit earlier, but what would be your advice to them?
It's very contextual, but I think broadly, the advice that I like, and I find I say to myself a lot, is there are no rules. There are no rules. There are always options, and you are only dead if you give up. As a founder, there are a million different ways that you can succeed, and it is ultimately up to you. If you need to take a debt round, it's going to be expensive. Fine. Do you believe that it's going to work? If so, you should take it, right? Can you introduce extra revenue by selling your data in a non-harmful way to your customer? You should explore that. There are a million different ways that people succeed. And every time someone does something that is paradigm shifting, everyone's like, I can't believe it. And then that's just the new norm, right? And so there are no rules, honestly. And again, I just think it comes back to you're only dead if you give up.
Yep. 100%. You got to go into cockroach mode and just stay alive.
That's exactly right.
The longer you stay alive, the more you can compound and keep things moving and outlast the competitors. Well, I could keep going. I have tons more questions, but we'll wrap it up there. Super appreciate you jumping on, another Miami native on the podcast, and from one of my favorite companies, and excited to continue to watch you guys crush it. So thanks for jumping on.
This has been a ton of fun. I really appreciate the time, and I hope the listeners find a lot of value in this. And Kimia at Ramp.
Maybe we'll get some Ramp customers out of it. Who knows?
That's right. I hope this is valuable. This is a lot of fun. Thanks, Michael.
Yep. Likewise. See you, man. Thanks for listening to the Out of the Woods podcast. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. More episodes are on the way. If you want to keep the conversation going, suggest questions, or nominate guests for future episodes, you can reach me on Twitter at Michael Martocci. Good luck and see you next time.